Who's the favorite class?
Right.
Whoa.
All right, guys, welcome to 2023 Chat with Charlie. I have a co-host for this year. We're going to be doing 52 trainings. Each week, we're going to do little micro trainings. And my co-host for the year is Dr. P. We'll get some claps in there. We'll get some noise effects in there. And today, to launch us off on our first one, we're going to be talking about setting urgency. As we know, there's many ways to set urgency, internally for ourselves, externally for someone else. But I want to talk to Paulette a little bit about what is the importance of setting urgency?
With urgency, there's a link or a chain that goes urgency equals expectations.
Okay.
Because when you set the urgency, what are the expectations behind it? And that is, to me, the duality of that word urgency, because what are we urgent about? Are we busy or are we urgent?
Mm-hmm.
Are we urgent about setting or achieving a goal? Well, if we're going to achieve a goal, how are we going to get there without clear expectations? So That's my initial answer. And I know we're going to deep dive a little bit more, but I would say that's my initial answer.
Let's go into it with a DOA. You know, let's start with the missions reps. Mm-hmm. How can a DOA, or what have you found is one of the best ways to help mission reps set urgency with their prospects or even themselves, right? Because a mission rep has to set their own tone, and it kind of transfers on to someone else. So maybe instead of a two-part, let's start out with just a DOA working with their missions reps on setting their own personal urgency, and then we'll talk about transferring that on to a prospect.
One of the best ways that a DOA can perpetuate that urgency / expectation is be very clear about what they want from that rep.
Okay.
In order to do that, you have to know your reps.
Give me some for instance.
For instance, if you know your reps, you know which ones you can expect, whether it be appointment shows, whether it be phone calls, whether it be a strong show rate. You have to know your audience.
Right.
And that the DOAs must be consistent about written and verbal expectations. And it starts in the beginning.
Right.
So let's just go back. I live by a couple things, and they're all pretty much people that know me. You've been knowing me for a while, but I believe that prior preparation prevents poor performance at all times.
And you say that a lot.
I do. A DOA comes in, he or she has to know what the expectation is for themselves first. Mm-hmm. So what does their day look like? When they come in, they get their day started. They need to have expectations for what they're going to be forecasting. You know, what are they going to be pointing at about if they're going to be looking at the start, you know, how many students are packaged. Then there's an order of things that they will do for themselves before they can even start to request that of the reps. Mm-hmm. So you're sitting down, you're looking at your business, you're evaluating what the need of the day is in a small portion because you have a start to manage. Mm-hmm. And then you look at your audience. Those are your reps. You know, and if you're coming in and you're saying, okay, well, last week's show rates, a Monday, last week's show rates, we had a ton of no-shows. We have some CPS we need to recoup. We need to get them back into the door. Then you start looking at it by rep. Okay, now this is where I'm going to go. Either I'm going to attack it through lead rotation, lead reassignment. I may even take some people off lead flow for that day or for that week. And then they start to drill that down with their one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. So that urgency comes from the DOA, knowing that they have to check themselves at the door first. And no, you can't just run into the door and say, okay, let's make this start. That's not how we make starts. You have to be strategic about what you're going to do each day, how you're going to do it, and who are your players.
So structure, it sounds like structure equals urgency too, right?
It does.
Now I would say, like, think back when you were a DOA, and one of the hardest things I believe coming from a rep to a DOA, most reps, they've got some structure, they got some numerics, but at the end of the day, they just try to grind it out and see what works out. I mean, really, that we don't want them to do that. We want them to be more calculated. But at the end of the day, they just throw everything out there and let's just grind it out. But as a DOA, you have to be ahead of that game with structure to help them kind of navigate those, throwing it up against the wall and see what sticks. You know what I mean? And I think that's one of the hardest things as a DOA, because you're so busy that you fall into that rut as doing the same thing. And you have to be so much better than that rep so they can see that. Meaning, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, that if you're not having your stand-ups consistently and routinely, if you're not having your scrub consistently and routinely, if you're not having your one-on-ones consistently and routinely, your reps mimic that action with who they're talking to. So that skill transfers onto them. And I don't want to overtalk this, but I have found that I've never been an urgent person because it's just innately in me. But that structure breathes urgency to everybody else because they know damn well there's something I'm doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
Exactly.
without a doubt.
Exactly.
You get what I mean?
Exactly. You said two things. Grinding it out, because reps do that. But the DOA, you are the map. You are the map. You create that. You're responsible for creating this navigational system for the reps. But if a DOA doesn't have that map already figured out, already structured, what days I'm doing the huddles, what day and time, consistently, what day I'm going to scrub, mandatory, there's no exceptions, the days that you're going to be doing audits, and the reps know that you're consistently creating that map, yeah, they're going to grind it out, but they stay the course. And that's why our most successful DOAs are successful with their teams, not because they're the most glorious DOAs, but they're consistent. Their reps depend on that structure and consistency because when they go back to their offices, they know they have to stay the course and still produce.
That's right.
They have to stay the course and still produce.
And you can't be like that senior admissions rep, if you get what I mean, amongst your reps. You've that leadership quality, whether they think they're better than you or not, because I love being challenged. Go ahead and size me up. We can do that. But they can't rival when you got that structure built in. So that's an important piece. And I can tell you, Paulette and I visited a lot of campuses, and 9 times out of 10, and I can't say we wouldn't fall prey to this, but the DOAs are unfocused on what they should be focused on. And I'm not painting a wide brush. No one go, we ain't talking about me. I don't mean it like that. I'm just saying it's so easy to let distractions creep in when all you got to focus on is one thing.
Exactly.
And that's being an interview or finding an interview. And that's what you have to put in that structure. That's to me, right? So let's take it a little bit further, because I personally, I'll give you a scenario.
Okay.
And I use this scenario a lot. My son's name is Ashton. He's a boy.
I have a shin.
You got a shin, right? You got that. He ain't getting up at 3:00 doing no workouts and doing all right. So if I tell him to mow the lawn this week, 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna be reminding him on Friday, why haven't you mowed the lawn yet? But if I say mow the lawn by Tuesday, by dang, that lawn's gonna get mowed by Tuesday.
Right.
Do you get what I mean? I use that as a very subtle example of what we can do from the structure down from a DOA to how we talk to a prospect. And I'll ask you this, one, if that analogy makes sense, because I think it does. But 2, I feel like we do our prospects a disservice when we don't handle them like adults with due dates, things to do. They're spending 50 whatever grand on this education. We should expect them to deliver what we expect them to deliver if they're committed to us. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So going back to that analogy, it makes perfect sense. I was talking to my new regional trainer, Jessica, and she said that every time I say something, I attach an action to it. And I said,
like it.
You're learning quick, right? And she's like, I noticed that. She said, when you ask someone to do something, you'll say today, 30 minutes, in the next hour. She said, even if you say that you're going to get back with them, you put a timestamp on yourself. But that's accountability.
Right.
Okay? So I say all that to say this is that it starts with us as leaders, in the same analogy you gave, but also as a DOA. We have to make sure that we're holding ourselves as accountable too. So it transcends to the DOA. The DOA, it transcends to the reps, because we have some reps that do that. We have some
Right.
DOAs, like for example, I'll use Angel Foreman
Right.
as that DOA. She has grown so much over the years that I've known and worked alongside her, but she's very intentional and she does the same thing. And I've watched her grow. Well, that transcends to her reps. So her reps don't have loose conversations over the phone. Oh, I'll call you back and see what you're thinking.
That's right.
Oh, let me know when you're ready. No, you're on the phone. You have a purpose. You're speaking to me. I would like to meet with you. Let's come to the campus tomorrow at whatever time, today at whatever time. In addition to, there's going to be some steps of those, and it starts on the phone. It starts in the beginning, that a first initial phone call, it has to be some type of action. Not I'll call you back or I'll see you tomorrow. That's not an action. The action is, I'm going to text you. Text me your ETA tomorrow before you get here so I can make sure that you're on your way. Or call me if you don't get my text in the next 30 minutes. It has to be an action from the very beginning so that that person knows that this is not an appointment. I want to go back to that too. Being very intentional about the urgency / expectation. We have internal verbiage we use. Appointments, we use interview. When you're talking to an external candidate, that is a career planning session. You're not going to school. What's going to school? You're not going to school.
Down.
Exactly. But we have to keep that above board. The leadership, the DOAs keep that above board so it transcends to their reps. And I hear it. I hear it on calls. I can't say I hear it now because I have a new region, so I haven't started looking yet. But in my old region, I got to the point where I was hearing that. And it takes time, but it starts with leadership. That verbiage that vernacular has to be above board, because mentally then your actions are above board. And you're not going to take loosey-goosey rep excuses and loosey-goosey. When the system went down, okay, so what's your plan? Everybody's down. What do you want me to do different than what we've been doing? You have lists. You have emails with leads coming through. Let's get creative.
Right.
So you have to stay above board, and then your actions and then your reps then start to step up.
They will, and it's an automatic thing. It's just like, again, the child or even a young person looking up to someone, they mimic you no matter what. If you're coming in late, if you're not prepared for meetings, if you're given a vision statement and it's ums or uhs and there's a lot of blanks, if you don't do that, they're immediately going to respond and follow you, right? The same thing is true. I remember, I got to use a football analogy. I know everybody hates it. But I remember way back in the day when I was first coaching, we used to cut it up a lot in the weight room, but we weren't getting our reps in. And I remember the head coach said, there's times when you cut it up and there's times when you're serious. So in the summer workouts, we changed. We cut it up with them because we had to be rapport. You got to be at a certain level. Just like when you're talking to a prospect, you got to relate to them. You got to understand them. You can't be up here and they're down here and you're just telling them and transactional with them, right? So we had to do that because we got to have their buy-in. They got to know we got their back and they got our back. But when it came to the weight room, we switched gears. We were there to rep out. And you know what we did? We started repping out with them. And we started putting up bench press. We started squatting with them. Maybe not the whole thing, but we were doing it with them, and the tone significantly changed. And so when it was game time, you had your game face on. Right. You weren't over in the corner in the locker room BSing and laughing and stuff like that. It was ready to go because that's what the coaches were looking like. Right. So I would say, to me, the DOA holds all those cards.
They do.
Not the campus director, not FA. If they got a director, FAO, it's the DOA has got to set that tone. And if that person's walking around doing all this other stuff, well, they're going to walk around. They're doing work, right? But it's not what they're there to do, that type of thing. If that makes sense to you.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Good. So why do you think we get out of that? What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I was going to use you as an example.
Uh-oh.
And
be careful. We may have to cut this out, Mark.
No. Charlie, you're very intentional because you are very productive and you have to be productive in your role. And that transcends to your people, even to us. So in my mind, when you ask me to do something, I'm like already zoomed in like, okay, what does he need? Let me go ahead and get to whatever it is he needs. Because I know you need it, but you're like this. And I know you need it quickly. There's no dilly-dallying around. You need it.
You didn't say lollygagging.
No lollygagging. And what that meant to me is, and what that's created over the few years that we've worked together, and it happens, and I've seen it happen among different campuses that are successful in their admissions teams, is trust. Because there's reciprocity there. I have to perform for you because there's something you need from me. But if I ask you for something or I need something from you, you're just as responsive. And I don't know if you've noticed that, but in your leadership, it's the same reciprocity that happens.
For sure.
And the example that we're giving, it happens over time. And not only do the expectations become easier to meet because the goal is there, the map is created, the conversations are had. Exactly. And then there's that trust. And in any job that you want the trust to ensure that your livelihood is based on the performance, it's based on the data, it's based on you meeting the expectations. And that actually transcends at the campus. So you're a prime example of that. And I don't know if you realize it, but it happens all the time. As soon as you ask for something, even today, sitting here with you going, in my mind, I was like, okay, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but hey, let's do it. I'm there for him. I'm right there with him. So, it happens. And there's a level of trust, and that gives confidence, and that creates other leaders too.
That's an interesting, but I appreciate that one. I really do. That's why she's co-host, actually. I'm just joking. So in closing, I know there's going to be some DOAs out there. One, I do that already. I'm not worried about that. Some may be, okay, how can I switch my game? What can I do? And there's some that just don't know. They just don't know what they don't know yet, which is not a bad thing. What would you say, not to any one of those, but just to a DOA that's saying, look, the cats are kind of a little hard to herd right now.
Okay.
What can I do? Because one of the worries, let me give my son another example, Cameron. I'm not going to say what it is, but he had a situation where he was in good standing and then he fell out of standing.
Okay.
He felt he couldn't get back in good standing because of what he already did in the eyes of other people when he was, not in the standards, right? And so it blocked him. He forever couldn't get back there. And I was like, son, don't worry about that. I read a quote the other day. Don't worry about yesterday. Just worry about today, right? New Year's is always a good thing for that, is you can wipe yourself clean, go take a shower, do something symbolic of it or whatever. And don't worry about it. Just start now, right? Weight loss, start now.
Right.
Asking for real, start now. Like, don't worry about what you haven't done. What advice can you give, especially with your experience, that can help a DOA say, okay, what can I do to get that control back? Be it talking to a CED, you know what I mean? What is it that you could give advice for?
I would say I can only use my old region until I get to know my new peeps.
I hear you.
But we've read books. We always read a book a quarter, and there was one book that we read called The Trust Edge, and it was a really good book, probably one of the most profound that we've read as a team.
Okay.
And one of the pieces of advice, and we stayed a lot in this chapter, it talked about self. And as leaders, you have to trust yourself first. You have to trust who you are. You have to trust what you believe in. And then you have to trust your reality. So what is your reality? If I'm an underperforming DOA, I have to trust my reality and ask myself, why am I underperforming? A reality check. Am I spending too much time not doing something I need to be doing? Am I too busy being busy where I'm not being productive? You have to trust your reality. And when you get to that point where you can self-evaluate, then you can go back and set some new expectations so that you can get to the goal. That's when you pick up your mentors. That's when you pick up your CED. You sit down with your regional trainer. You call Charlie. You call another peer that is doing well. You call somebody in your region that's the number one DOA and say, hey, I sucked last year. I know that. I didn't do I didn't do the basics. I didn't do the fundamentals. I need you to hold me accountable. How are you managing your team? What snapshots are you sending your team every day? You have to start there. If you don't check yourself, you don't trust your own reality, you cannot set expectations for yourself or for your team.
I like that. Do you think that you said something in there? I'm trying to remember exactly how you worded it, but the bottom line is it okay to be vulnerable to your team?
That's a tricky question. There is a level of vulnerability that you should maintain because people need to know you're real. I mean, I'm not a brick wall. I'm not. And if my team knows, yes, I'm stern. Yes, I'm pretty consistent. I get all that. But there's a level of vulnerability that I show them that I'm human, right? So the other level that you don't want to expose is when you are in those moments where it's frustrating, those emotional moments.
Well, we show it.
The emotional moments are the ones where you vent up and not down. So, yes, you could be vulnerable.
Say that again to make sure they understand that.
You vent up and not down.
Yep.
If I'm having a concern, I'm not going to call my CED and gripe to a CED. My CEDs report to me. I can't call my CED and gripe to them. I'm going to have to vent to a regional, a vice president, person I report to, but I won't gripe down because that's going to affect their level of performance. If I have a CED and I gripe down to them, then I turn around and ask them to meet my expectations, they're going to say, well, hey, you were pissed off about that too. You were upset too.
And it changes their thought process, right?
It changes the dynamic.
Because they'll adopt, again, going back to what we said, they're going to mimic what you're doing, right? How you're walking. There's a lot of people that start mimicking walking, mimicking how you talk, mimicking how you conduct yourself. So you got to be careful.
Yes.
Interesting. So trust is the big trust edge.
Yes.
So everybody look for that book. I'll ask for everybody to try to buy that. If you can't, reach out. But talk to your CED. I think you all should get that book and check it out. Get it on tape if you don't like to read. Maybe Paulette can do an audio version for us or something, or something like that. But I'll tell you guys, this is not one thing about Paulette, and I'll include myself in that, is we've been there. We get it. Yeah. We've been through the heartache. We've been through the celebrations. We just know, right? We know when we, cut a little bit of corners because of timing, or we're a little bit stressed, so we're pushing maybe a little bit too hard. The only thing that I can say for me, other than what Paulette said, is stick to what you know best. You were hired for a reason to be a director. And one thing when I've come here, and I think I've shared it with you, Paulette, is I'm not sure if we take ourselves as deliberate as we should as an executive leader over a campus. Whether you got 3 reps, 4 reps, 5 reps, 20 reps, it really doesn't matter, because a leader is someone that instills that vision so others can follow it through. And the urgency setting is so important, because if we don't have urgency in ourselves, we don't set those expectations, it is never going to transfer to someone else, if that kind of makes sense to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
All right, guys, our time is short. My co-host and I will be back next week with another topic. And I invite you guys too. I sent an email out. I was a little bit heartbroken that no one sent any topics that they wanted to hear about this year from us. So please send us any topics you'd like to hear. We do have about 40-something topics throughout the year that we're going to be doing, but there is no reason why we can't add others or scoot some up in the front, or whatever you guys want to do. I want this to be important for you. I don't want this to be ego so we can just talk to you and be on TV or whatever. I want this to be impactful, because we are from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and this is the best mode of communication that I feel we can give, just to remind us, keep that saw sharpened, keeping it simple. I'll tell you another thing that you said that I just loved is keeping it simple. I mean, I am not a smart guy, and when I was at DOA, it was very simple for me. There was maybe 2 or 3 reports. It was start day report, lead master listing, and that was really it. And then I would just monitor some stuff out on the floor. In fact, half the stuff I monitored, it was just by gut on how someone looked, how they were talking, or what they were doing. That's all it was. But this is not a complicated job. I feel we make it complicated, but your consistency is probably the most important ingredient, how it transcends down, and it starts with you. And I will tell you, you can affect a whole campus by doing that. Mm-hmm. The work you do in admissions can be contagious to the other functional areas. Again, hope these are helpful. They're just meant to plant some seeds and get you thinking. Other than that, Paulette, it's going to be a good 2-3. I'm going to enjoy it. So we'll be back at you. We'll try to change our clothes up for the next session, and we'll be seeing you weekly.
Thank you.
Talk to you then.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Paulette.